Hi guys, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Emma of Normandy had the honour, if that's what you want to call it, of being married to two kings of England and mother to another two. The first of her husbands was Aethelred II, better known to history as Aethelred the Unready. His reign was a complete and utter disaster. Unlike previous Anglo-Saxon kings who had fought against Viking raiders valiantly, Aethelred was hopelessly out of his depth. Bribery was his main method of staving off further devastation in his kingdom, but this failed dismally. In 1002, Aethelred made an ill-advised decision in a desperate attempt to show he could fight back. That year he ordered an indiscriminate slaughter of Danes living peacefully in England. Men and women, young and old, were killed. Among the victims was the sister of the Danish king, Svein Forkbeard, and her husband. Furious, Svein would make Aethelred's life a misery for the next decade, until eventually he deposed and exiled the English king in late 1013. But Svein didn't enjoy power in England for long, and in early February of 1014 he died. Aethelred returned from exile, but Svein's son Canute took up his father's cause. On Aethelred's death in 1016, the throne of England would be up for grabs between Canute and Aethelred's son Edmund Ironside. Emma was now widowed, but not for long. In 1017, she married Canute after he had successfully seen off the challenge of Edmund, and Edmund had been murdered at the end of 1016. Emma was now Queen of England for a second time. With Aethelred, Emma had produced three children: Edward, who will be known to history as Edward the Confessor, Alfred, who will be murdered quite horribly in the mid-1030s, and a daughter called Godgifu, who became Countess of Boulogne. With Canute, Emma produced two more children: a daughter named Gunhilda, who married the German king and future Holy Roman Emperor, Henry III, and a son named Harthacnut, who, like his half-brother Edward the Confessor, would also become King of England. Emma's father was Count of Rohan, and her mother was a woman named Gunna. During her lifetime, a book was written in praise of Emma called the Icomnion, Emma Reginae, which, as the image shows, was actually presented to Emma during her lifetime. As one can imagine, it's lavish in its praise of its subject. Emma is described as being of the greatest nobility and wealth, and praised for her wisdom and beauty. Emma was certainly a shrewd woman. When Canute sent messengers seeking her hand in marriage, Emma played a canny game. She knew that Canute had sons from an earlier relationship with another woman. This meant that if Emma was to produce more sons for Canute, then theirs, as well as Emma's, futures would be very uncertain if Canute died. Emma wanted guarantees for her and her offspring's futures before she accepted the marriage proposal. Canute agreed to her terms, and they were married. According to the Icomnion, there was great rejoicing at the marriage between Emma and Canute, but this may be a bit of an exaggeration. Canute was, in effect, a conqueror, and his popularity would have been far from universal with the Anglo-Saxons. But over time, Canute grew in confidence, and with sensible governance, he established his authority. He reigned for nearly 2 decades in England, and his reign can be certainly considered a success, especially when stood in contrast with the reign of Aethelred the Unready. But with Canute's death in 1035 came uncertainty for Emma. It was Harold Harefoot, Canute's son from his first marriage, who seized power. The heavily biased Icomnion accuses Harold of using threats of force to claim the crown, and the author also blames the nobility for abandoning Emma's sons. With Harthacnut preoccupied in Denmark, Emma wrote to her sons from her first marriage, Edward and Alfred, who had remained in Normandy after their father, Aethelred's deposition in 1013. Emma urged them, or at least one of them, to return to England and remove Harold Harefoot from power. Emma knew she faced potential political extinction if things carried on the way they were. Edward and Alfred would heed her call. In 1036, Edward and Alfred arrived in England, but disaster soon befell them. There are different versions of events to describe what actually happened. One is that Alfred and Edward were attacked almost as soon as they landed in England. Another is that they were brought to Guildford by Earl Godwin, the most powerful man in the country, where scores of Edward and Alfred's retinue were violently attacked by King Harold's men. Among the victims was Alfred himself, who had been blinded in such hideous fashion that he died of his injuries not long after. Edward escaped the violence, but in keeping with Emma's sensible advice, he swiftly returned to Normandy. Emma too came to the realization that England was becoming an increasingly dangerous place for her, and she too crossed the Channel, making her way to Flanders, where she was greeted with warmth by the Count there. Here she could plot potential revenge on Harold Harefoot. Emma's first move was to write to Harthacnut in Denmark to inform him of the great injustice that had befallen her, Edward, and Alfred, and she begged him to come help her. Harthacnut was outraged at the fate of Alfred, but in 1040 Harold Harefoot died anyway, and this left the path clear for Emma and Harthacnut to return to England. In their eyes, Harefoot was a usurper. There were serious question marks over Harold Harefoot's birth, and even if he was really the son of Canute. The brutal treatment of Alfred made him nothing more than a tyrant, and Harthacnut showed the world what he thought of Harefoot by having his corpse dug up and thrown in a bog. Harthacnut had far more brotherly affection for his other half-brother, Edward, and the two had a good relationship during Harthacnut's brief reign over England. After years of turbulence, Emma may have looked forward now to a period of stability in her life. At the time of Harthacnut's death in 1042, she was well into her 50s, but with the succession of her one remaining son, Edward the Confessor, further strife would befall her. The all-too-powerful Earl Godwin began to whisper false accusations about Emma to King Edward, even suggesting treason, and for a time it worked. Emma lost lands and titles, but she eventually came back into the king's favour. She died in 1052. Emma was the wife of two kings of England, Aethelred the Unready and Canute. She was the mother of another two kings of England, Harthacnut and Edward the Confessor. She had been right at the centre of English politics for half a century.